Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to be talking to you about pretty much everything that I've read in the month of June. Normally, I do weekly reading wrap-ups, and so I only have like a couple of books to talk about it at one time, but this month is a little different. So I am going to work my way through telling you about all of this here. Like, Fortunately, I don't have book reviews to do in this video on every single one of them, but I'm going to talk about what went on with all of these. So this week I have a little bit of everything. I have DNFs, I have book reviews that are going to be coming out soon that I want to tell you about. I have a book review and book discussion that is currently out that I want to share with you. And I have the books that I've actually finished that I'm going to review in this video. So let me go ahead and get started with those. I'm going to start with the books that I've DNF'd. I am on like a DNFing streak this month. And I think what has happened is that I've DNF'd a bit since the beginning of the year. And I'm finding that every time I do that and I like just admit that I don't want to read this book and I don't want to read it right now, and I can't come up with a reason that I want to read it later, and I move on to something else, I end up reading a five-star read. And I'm just realizing that I need to trust my instincts with the books, even the books that I own, even books that I've like purchased fairly recently in the last few years. And I'm at peace with DNFing these books. And that's all that should matter. I think there's a part of me that's like waiting for the book police to show up and comment on my DNFing and unhauling books. So here's what I've DNF'd. The Fifth Business. This is the Deptford trilogy by Robertson Davies. I had some really high hopes for this, and I've got to admit, it was a struggle. I made it through the first 138 pages of this book. Now, this is a bind up of all three books in the trilogy, and I only have about another 100 pages to go. I really don't care. I don't care so much that I don't want to read it one more day because I'm just not convinced that there even is a story. So I could go on, but this is a DNF. Maybe before I unhaul this at the end of the month, I'll find time to sit down and read the 100 pages. But the end of the month is the end of June, and it's June 24th when I'm reading this. So am I actually going to take time in the next 6 days to spend a whole day finishing this book? Probably not. The second book you can see here, I'm DNFing Cloud Atlas. Like I said, oh, I'm taking my bookmarks to go. Not pa. Um, I'm DNFing Cloud Atlas because it's the same thing. Like, I don't care about the actual story. So this feels like a set of interconnected short stories. Uh, they are short stories. They're written in very different manners, and I can already see what the connection is. And I've heard that it comes full circle. Like you go through a set of stories, and you reach the last one, and then you come back to each of them. I don't care. Like I don't want to go back to some of them. I have read one, two, three, the first four stories in here. There's two more to go. I've only liked one of the four. So I'm like, that means I need to go through two more that I may or may not like. And then I've got to go back through at least three stories that I didn't like the first time and don't think I'm going to like the second time around. Sometimes it's the writing, sometimes it's the story's not that interesting. David Mitchell does do a good job of like hooking you at the very end of the story, but the one story that I liked, I was kind of like, you ruined it at the end. I don't know. It's one of those where the only reason I would keep reading is because I'd want to see what happens when he comes back around. But then there's a huge part of me that's like, I don't care because I didn't like the way the stories were written to begin with, and I thought they were kind of boring until maybe the last two pages. So I'm supposed to be buddy reading this with Coda and Nicole. Sorry. And yeah, I think at this point I have the audiobook on hold. So maybe when the audiobook comes in 8 weeks from now, I'll listen to it because I like having an audiobook on the go, and at least maybe that'll like help me itch that little bit of curiosity or scratch that little bit of curiosity that I have. And if not, I'm just gonna watch the movie, as I think as a movie it would work better. And I've heard the movie's good, so I would watch that as a movie. That's the plan, either audiobook or movie. But normally in the past, I will say I would have put both these books on pause. What I learned earlier this year is that when I pause books, I never come back to them, and or I don't really want to come back to them, and that they should have just been DNF'd. So even on Storygraph, I'm not pausing them even until the audiobook comes in. I'm just flat out DNFing those books. Okay, that's all the DNFs. Good vibes from here on out? I don't know. We'll see. I do have some book reviews that are being done in different ways. So I am currently in the middle of a personal reading challenge, and it's the ultimate high school rereading challenge that I am doing with my friend Alex at Stay at Home Reader. And I did a video about this. We did a tag video about this. She did videos about this. And now we are in the process of recording our book discussions and conversations that we're having about the books that we're reading as we attempt to reread books off our high school reading list and see if they hold up. We have already read and discussed the first book, and that is A Clockwork Orange. I have never read this before. This was a book that Alex had to read for high school, and I'll show you a little like sneak peek at the conversation that we had.
What about this book would make it a part of a high school reading list?
I don't know. A Clockwork Orange. This is what my edition looks like. What does your edition look like?
I have this. My expectation going into this was that it would not hold up as much as I wanted it to. Like, I was like, fingers crossed, please still love this book, because like when I think of like what are my favorite books of all time, this would land on that list.
There were moments where I was like, has she read this yet? I came so close to being like,
Can't
Alex,
do it.
I don't think I could do this. Like, whoa, like,
Yeah.
what are we reading? How did you get assigned to this in high school? Who would ever sign this ever?
Burgess is like, I enjoyed writing the things he did. Like, I would never do them, but like I enjoyed imagining them. No. I watched that movie, I think my freshman year of high school, and I was not okay with it. I think I watched it multiple times too, and there was a kid in my class who absolutely loved it, and I was like, dude, I'm judging you. So historically, I rate things higher than you do.
True. So we're staying pretty consistent.
Yeah, we're consistent, if nothing else. So
I'm really excited about this challenge. Hopefully that got you curious. If you want to see the entire discussion, you will need to go over to Alex's channel, and basically our full discussion is up over there. And I will put in the description box below a link to that video so you can go and watch it. We talk about all sorts of things. We have a spoiler section, we have a non-spoiler section. Most of it we tried to avoid spoilers for. And yeah, it was just a great conversation. We always have so much fun talking about books. And believe it or not, we had discussed this book before we got on and discussed it further. But we just had so many thoughts and so much to say. And if you've read A Clockwork Orange, you know. And if you haven't, go watch that video so you'll know whether or not you want to read it. Because if you don't want to read it, I totally get it. Another book that I have to review that will be coming out soon is Jellyfish Have No Ears in the month of June. This was my viewer pick. So every now and then I ask in TBR videos for people to vote on books that they want to read, and then I read the book that got the most votes. This was it for June. I have read it, I have thoughts, and I'm going to do a standalone book review on it, and that will come out in July. So you have that to look forward to. There were a lot of people who were really curious about this book, what it's about, what my thoughts were on it, and I share it all in that video. So be sure to look out for that. Once that video's out, I'll try to remember to come back and link it in the description box below. No promises though. So you might want to like, subscribe, etc., etc. Okay, and then the other video that I have coming out is for our next high school reread, which is The Things They Carried. So we have, as of today, already read that. We just discussed it earlier this morning, and that video will be coming out probably in July. So I'm a little like all over the place with my scheduling right now of videos, but that one will be coming out on my channel. So because it's my high school reread. So that's how we're going to be doing it. We're both going to be reading the books. We're going to be alternating whose channel the videos are on, and it's going to be a good time. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about in general, like I did do a video on this, so you can go and watch that. It's just I have so much to talk about, but I don't want to go into like details about all these other things. Now I'll move into all the books that I have finished and read, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about these ones. There were varying thoughts on them. I will say, like, let you know right now, they weren't all good. But the first one was, and that was In the Matter of Nat Tomlin. In the Matter of Nat Turner, A Speculative History by Christopher Tomlins. That's where the Tomlin part came in. This is a work of nonfiction, and I decided to read this because last year, I think it was, my worst book of the year was William Styron's Confessions of Nat Turner. And I really did not like that book at all, and I did a whole like rant video on it that you can go and watch if you want to know about it. Reading that book ended up making me decide that I wanted to learn more about Nat Turner and other perspectives, not just on Nat Turner, but about William Styron's desire to write this historical fiction, which he swore wasn't historical fiction. It just took me down a rabbit trail and created a whole book project. During reading William Styron's book, I actually read the physical document of Nat Turner's confessions because it is actually a real event that happened. It's known mostly as the Turner Rebellion, and you can still find free copies of Nat Turner's Confessions, or what is known as his Confessions, which is a historical document, and I will link that below. That again made me want to get more into the speculative history and more knowledge about this, but I wanted to get it from a nonfiction viewpoint, and I wanted it to discuss all the speculation around Nat Turner. This book promised to do that, and so I bought it, and I have to say, it delivered on its promise. So, the author's intent in writing this, as he says in the book, is to make sense of indistinguishable moments and produce an enlivened Nat Turner who is no longer merely an enigmatic spectator. And I think he did that in this book. So I really use this book more as a reference than as like a book that I felt like I needed to read cover to cover. So do keep that in mind in my review of this book. And I'm also not going to give it a star rating because of that. For me, what I found the most useful in reading this book was, for starters, the prologue. The entire prologue of this book is a discussion of William Styron's book about the Confessions of Nat Turner, his fictional work that he created, and all the problems that this author sees that occurred in the writing of that book. He does a very long and thorough discussion in the prologue just about what that book did at the time, the impact it's had since, both pros and cons of it, as well as he took the time to really dig up a lot of research about all the conversations that happened about that book after its publication. I think this book is an excellent follow up to that book, and it really confirmed that some of the things that I thought were off about the book, like it confirmed that it made sense that those things felt off. I also really appreciated part 1 and 2 of this book. This book is told in, I think, 4 parts. And the reason I liked part 1 and 2 was because they really went into the original text, that document that I talked about. He really went into that original text and dissected it in a historical manner and talked about, like, what do we know about this text? What don't we know about it? And what does it actually tell us about the history at the time? He does a structural critique of the pamphlet that came out that included Nat Turner's Confessions, and I thought it was masterfully done. I mean, if you just want a good example of what it looks like to critique the structure and format of a document and determine what that tells you about history at the time, I think you could read chapter 1 in this book just for that. I will say the part of this book that I got the least out of was part 3, not because it wasn't equally well written, not because he didn't have valid points, but it's because for me personally, like I said, I was using this as a reference, and I had a very limited scope of what information I wanted to get out of it. So do know, if you read this book, that you don't have to have read William Styron's book. The only part of this book that won't make sense if you haven't read William Styron's book is the prologue. The vast majority of this book really is just about the Turner Rebellion. I think the only thing that I wanted more of is, because he said it was a speculative history, I really wanted more discussion of the speculation surrounding Nat Turner himself, where I felt like it was really more the speculation around the initial document. And then after that, just got into the history of, like, what do we know or think happened immediately afterwards? But it didn't carry it really outside that time. I still thought it was a really good book. He covered a lot of different discussions. Clearly, he talked in depth about Nat Turner's Confessions, like the actual historical document. He talked about William Styron's book. He talked about the structural analysis of the historical document and the interpretation of that at the time, as well as maybe a more correct interpretation of it. He also talked about other historians' interpretations of that document, and he talked about the impact of economic interest at the time on the Virginia slave trade. I think this book is a great book for anybody who likes to read nonfiction about a variety of topics, but especially American history and maybe particularly Virginia state history. If you're curious and want more information on the Turner Rebellion, I think this would be a good resource. And if you like the intersection of literature and history, I think this is also an excellent book for that. The next book that I read is A Passage to Indian by E.M. Forster. This is the third book that I have read recently by E.M. Forster. I think starting last summer, I read Howard's End. I then towards the beginning of this year, I believe it was, read A Room with a View, and now I'm on to A Passage to India. This is a reread for me, and I wasn't sure how I was going to like it. I read it for the first time in college, and I recall feeling that the vast majority of the book was boring. So, A Passage to India is a book that follows the lives of multiple people living in the 1920s in India. It uses the British and Indian characters within the book to explore human relationships, friendships, all happening in a small village in post colonial India, or at least like on the verge of Indian independence. This book covers a wide range of topics. There's discussion of colonialism, societal expectations on men, women, and the relationships between the British and Indian people. There's discussion of friendship, and there's also this ongoing sort of subtle messaging about culture clashes or miscommunication, faux pas. Like there's some word that incorporates the idea of two cultures existing in the same space but constantly miscommunicating with one another because they don't understand each other's cultures. Whatever that idea is throughout this book. Um, this worked pretty well. I think he really wanted you to experience how tense the relationships were between what he calls like Euro Asians, which were the Europeans who have spent a long time living in India, versus those who were native to India and had been lifelong people there, versus the like newcomers, which were people who were still just coming over from Europe, either for short term or long term stays or whatever. I think he does a really good job of using events in the book at times to create a lot of tension, to really explore different themes, and he loves a good plot twist, and so do I. So I can definitely appreciate that in this book. It did have quite a few lows for me though, and one of them did turn out to be the pacing. Sure enough, I was partway through the book and I did start to feel like it really slowed down and I started getting really bored. I wasn't interested in the conversations that were being had. I felt like they were being drawn out way too long, and I realized I'm just not sure I always like Forster's writing style. Also felt like that the plotting of this book wasn't really well on. I felt like it took too long for the book to resolve after the climax, and I even ended up feeling like he inserted a subplot after the climax of the book, which is very atypical. I don't think was like planned or on purpose, but there was a climatic moment in the book that I felt like things should have gone on and semi quickly resolved, like because it felt like we were moving towards a resolution or that kind of thing. But then it was like the book kept going uphill a little bit and like but there was no real second climax in the book. And I don't know. It was just odd plotting to me. It didn't work for me. It ended up being a 3-star read for me, which I'm sorry to say. And it's now really making me question Ian Forster as being a potential favorite writer. I don't think he's going to be, which kind of saddens me because Howard's End was such a high. I don't think this is a book that everybody would dislike. I never think that with anything that I read. I'd never make that assumption. I think this is a book that would be enjoyed by people who like character studies, who like societal conflict, which I do, but a specific type of societal conflict that has to surround like relationships with two different groups of people. I think if you like very expressive and sometimes tangential prose that can kind of go on at length and really get stuck on a topic that may or may not be related to the plot, you could enjoy this. And I think you also have to be the type of person who can really enjoy a slow paced novel, which I can, but this particular one just wasn't the one for me. And then the final book that I read, and probably the one that I feel like is most well known on BookTube, is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This was my first Otessa Moshfegh. I came to this book in a very different way than I think a lot of people on social media have. I think a lot of people have read this book because Otessa Moshfegh and particularly this book got very hyped. I think the cover in its own quirky way is very appealing to people and that kind of thing. I actually didn't read this book because of the hype. I didn't buy it because of the hype, and I'm not going to keep it because of the hype. But I am going to keep this book because I read this book and picked it up because I was reading Oblomov last summer, which is a classic work of fiction. And I had so many people, when I shared with them what that book was about, tell me that it reminded them of this book. Like, not one to one correlations, but that there were themes that came up that just sounded similar to them. And I love a good book project. I love a good comparative lit moment. And I was like, I've got to read this book at some point just so I can see what they're seeing potentially. Especially since a lot of the people who made that comment haven't read Oblomov. And a lot of people I know who have read Oblomov haven't read My Year of Rest and Relaxation. So I wanted to know, like, will this fit into my, if you've read this, classic, read this modern book? Well, let me tell you. So, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. What is this book about? Well, if I change the title, I would say you could probably call it Sex, Drugs, and Being a Rock at Home. Like that is what this book is basically about in some ways. It's a deep dive into one woman's attempt to escape reality through off-label drug use. And if that sounds weird, it is kind of a weird premise. Um, we follow an unnamed narrator in first person. I've read so many first person narrators this month, it's kind of insane. Um, and we get some information about what our narrator is about or is like up front. We know that she is beautiful, she is white, she is privileged, she comes from a very upper class background, and she is planning to do whatever she needs to do to give herself a break from life. She is very discontent with life as is. She really doesn't care. And yeah, she just wants to hibernate, as she puts it, and just, sort of go away, hibernate for a year, and hopefully come back as a new person. And the majority of this book ends up having us spend time with her as she struggles to hibernate while work and life keep interrupting her. And it also spends a lot of time telling us how she got to this point of having this as a deep desire. I think the reason that this book has gotten as popular as it has over the years is because people can relate to some of the feelings that our narrator is having, particularly that of feeling very anxious and overwhelmed by life and just wanting a break from it all. And I think Otessa Moshfegh does a very good job of helping us experience and explore that desire. What I think are lows in this book is that our narrator, like in so many books I don't like, is unlikable. I'm really starting to think that maybe I don't like unlikable narrators because they haven't been working for me this month. Um, but yeah, that I think is one of the biggest barriers for people in reading and appreciating and enjoying this book, and it became a barrier for me at a couple of different times. The things that I didn't like about her actually weren't her choices of what to do in terms of medicating herself and using self-medication. That actually wasn't what bothered me. Like, I can understand how a person could get to the point where they feel like that's the only choice they have. I don't need to agree with that choice to understand that choice. What I didn't like about our narrator was the variety of references to people's races. Like, she saw no one in life without seeing their race and commenting on it, usually in some negative trope or stereotype way. She talked very negatively about other people's ethnicity and culture at times, and again, like, fell into those tropes. So it wasn't like she was just privileged. It was like she discussed her privilege in a way that she was disgusted by other people. Even though she tried to make it seem at times as if she was better than that, she would then still go out and be like, oh yeah, those people, or that's like a working class thing, or those people of that background. You just got the sense that she was just like, she wasn't disgusted with people like Holden Caulfield was like disgusted with people being fake. She was like disgusted with people because, they weren't as privileged as her. They didn't live like she did. They weren't of her like culture and background. And I just don't like that. I don't like people being jerks to other people for no reason and using whatever is going on in their life as an excuse to be a jerk. Like, she's aware she's being a jerk most of the time. And she's a jerk anyway because she feels like, well, this person deserves it. Now, there is room, I think, to speculate that because she's like so drugged out that it's really the drugs that are like fogging her view of the world and all of this stuff. But based on the end of the book, I don't really think that even she would have given herself that excuse or that that's really supposed to be the explanation. Felt like a very flat character, which I could almost buy is because she's on all these pharmaceutical drugs. But I'm not buying it. I really think it was just flat characterization and that she just wasn't a deep person. She was also a very static character, meaning she was not dynamic. She did not change really over the course of the book. And some of that is intentional to the plot and does make sense, but in another sense, it just made it very dull. Like you just felt like you were going through it with her for a year and then longer than a year. And then I don't think the end of the book made the whole middle of it worth it. This book covers a lot of things, including pharmaceutical drug use, off label use of drugs, escapism. It does get into grief, which I expected. And it also talks about toxic relationships. These are all things that this young woman experiences. And I feel like I should be sympathizing with her as a character, but I struggle to do so because of things she's doing on the side. You would probably like this book better than I did. I gave it a 3. If you like character studies, this book may be for you. It does discuss the cross section of grief and like pharmaceutical drugs as a method and way of treating depression and hopelessness. Uh, I don't think it gets a lot into the conversation of that. It's definitely a lot more like observe and come to your own conclusions. But if you like that kind of thing, this might work for you. And if you like unlikable narrators, even when they're being cruel to other people and are just trying to excuse all their behavior because of something in their life, and you can work with that and handle that, then you might like this book. There were parts of this book that did remind me of Oblomov, which is the reason I read it to begin with. These are both characters who are struggling with the disconnect between their own thoughts and their own life experience and what they want out of life and what they see going on in society. They both have like their own grief that they're struggling to deal with, and they both try to deal with these things by escaping from the world. One of the biggest differences I find, however, is that Oblomov is a character that you come to understand and love. The narrator in this book, I did not have that experience with. I think a better example for this book is if you liked this book, you may like Catcher in the Rye. I will say, though, that I think Catcher in the Rye is the better of the two. And for the reason that I think you get a lot fewer excuses from Holden Caulfield. Like you understand him better as a character, and he is actually a more complex character than our narrator in here. It's also a better written book. There's more interesting things and more interesting symbols going on, that kind of thing. But that tends to happen with classics, whatever. But if you read this and you like it and you love it, read Catch in the Rye, vice versa. If you think this is good and liked this and you like classics, read Oblomov. That is hands down a better book. If you think that this book is better than Catcher in the Rye or Oblomov or vice versa, I'd love to hear your opinions on that. I'm open to discussing any of my thoughts with you. And yeah, that's it for today. I'll talk to you next time.